I truly have come to believe that the old cliche that every problem can be turned into an opportunity. And there may be tentative green shoots, very tentative green shoots right now, but all those of us in business are still going to have to face some very hard challenges in the months ahead. And so my advice to entrepreneurs is always get all of the free help that you can. Talk to enterprise agencies, talk to friends who've been in business, been there, done that, ironed the t-shirt, and be prepared to brainstorm. Because anything that an entrepreneur can do to help themselves think outside the box can help you find solutions to problems that seem completely insurmountable. When you're sitting at your desk, you've got 3,783 emails to answer, you've got a stack of invoices to pay, and a staff looking over your shoulder expectantly. So for Craig and me, what was really important was every night we would spend an hour walking the streets of Notting Hill where we lived, and we would have brainwaves. We would discuss packaging ideas, we would discuss promotions, and he would capture them all on a little instrument called a Voice-It, which he kept in his pocket. The visionary and futurist Buckminster Fuller once said that you have 42 seconds to capture an idea before it disappears out of your head. But personally, I think he was being fantastically optimistic. I have about 3.5 seconds. So for anybody here who has an iPhone, and I've had mine for a year and I still want to marry it, it has a little built-in voice recorder, and that's what I use now to capture my ideas. And on those walks, we would regularly look in shop windows to see how people were displaying our wares and their wares. And we would have to pause every night outside Cath Kidston for a moment or two while I licked her window. But actually that time away from jangling telephones and deadlines, and this was before email, with all of the additional daily pressures that puts on us, was really, really important, because it just gave us space to think. And I also made a point of blocking out time in my diary to go to networking events. I belonged, for instance, to something called the Social Venture Network, where I became very close to a woman who was my mentor, and the wonderful Anita Roddick. But, you know, I'd leave the office and I'd have this growing sense of panic about everything I had to do. Why am I going when I've got so much on my desk? But actually, even a day out was as good as a holiday. Because instead of feeling like this kind of lone salmon swimming upstream, for even a day, you just feel part of a shoal that's all going in the same direction. So you go back to your desk and you feel refreshed and revived and ready for all those endless challenges that are thrown at you. And I've also read lots and lots of business books over the last 20 years. I have a stack of them by my bed at any one time, and I like to find one thing in every book that I can take away, at least one thing. But one of my favourite pieces of advice actually came from Martha Stewart, and the world's first self-made woman billionaire, no matter what you think about her insider trading. And she said that in business you need two things. You need a microscope and a telescope. And the microscope lets you look at the very fine detail of your business, which is very important. But you also need a telescope, because you need to be able to stand back and look at the big picture. And that reminds me also of a phrase of my husband's, which is that in business you tend to focus on the urgent rather than the important. And all of the powerful people that I've ever known in business have also retained a vision of the big picture, no matter what those little everyday challenges were. Now, the real key to our success was just to create great chocolate, and we were 90% of the way there. But we decided strategically that we weren't going to do wild and wacky flavours. We weren't going to do Earl Grey. We weren't going to do pink peppercorn. We weren't going to do cardamom. We were going to do great organic versions of chocolate flavours that people already bought a lot of. So every time we launched a product, I would go out and I'd do a supermarket sweep and I'd buy all of the options available. And we would sit down and try them at the dinner table, and we would decide what we didn't like, the sweetness level, the amount of vanilla, etc. And we would brief the factory that we worked with to come up with samples. And we also decided to diversify, particularly because people forget about chocolate in the summer when it's hot. So we launched ice cream. We also launched a hazelnut and chocolate spread. And the story relating to that actually concerns my adorable then 6-year-old niece, Carson, because her mother had said to me that she didn't like the list of additives that were then in Nutella. And could we come up at Green and Blacks with an organic version? So we briefed our factory, as we always did, and they sent the first lot of samples, and my 6-year-old niece said, no, not Nutella. We did it with the second sample, and she sat down, no, don't like that. And it wasn't until the 5th attempt, when we kind of upped the hazelnut level a bit, that she actually said, oh, I really like that, that's like Nutella, I'll eat that. And she actually has been ever since. But my focus group consisted of one 6-year-old girl whose opinions I trusted, and I have to tell you that that is the only focus group that I have ever used. But in addition to getting the product perfect, what really mattered to us, and what I think you can see here, was design. A lot of people think they don't have money to spend on design, but I have to say that it has to come right at the top of the priority list. In a world which is becoming ever more design aware, you've got to look good on the shelf. And having had a career in magazines, I was always trying to create a cover which leapt off the shelf and into women's handbags. So I was incredibly conscious of how important looks really are in a product. And one day I fielded a call from a local design agency in Notting Hill called Pearl Fisher. And they loved our chocolate, they told me, but they really didn't love our packaging, and they wanted to get their hands on it. So I felt there was really nothing to lose by going to talk to them. And I was really impressed. They were a young agency, but they'd done a lot of exciting work already for Waitrose and Absolute Vodka, and I very much liked what I saw. The problem was, I said, I don't have a design budget. So they told me that they were so committed to the brand and they ate so much of it that they would come up with some designs for free, and if Craig and I liked them, then we could talk. So all I had to do then was get over my husband's somewhat more bar humbug feelings about designers, but he did actually tag along with me to see what they'd come up with. And in fact, they'd come up with 10 incredible designs, any one of which we could have used. But the one that we actually chose was the one that was closest to our existing brown and gold packaging, which then had a green seal on it. Because I remembered a conversation that I had had with a Coles supermarket buyer in Australia very, very early on, who told me if I had $1 for every brand that's had a redesign and fallen off the shelf afterwards, I would not be sitting here with you now. So that really stuck in my mind, and it shaped the decision to go for evolution and not revolution with the design. And every few years, Pearl Fisher still has to pitch for our business, but they're still coming up with gorgeous designs, including these new colourful packs. 16 years on, and I honestly think it's the combination of that superb product together with the design flair which has managed to help us retain our coolness despite the fact that you can actually buy our chocolate in a Tesco garage forecourt. I still open mini bars in hip hotels around the world, and I get really choked up to see our chocolate in there, and yet it's incredibly widely available.